afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Monroe Carmen. I'm president of the National Press Club and editor-at-large at Bloomberg Business News. I'd like to welcome club members and their guests in the audience. Can you hear me? All right, no. Is this on? I hope so. Anybody else having trouble? Okay, well, it's not on. Melissa? Go ahead. Now can you hear me? Well, good afternoon. I'll do it this way. My name is Monroe Carmen. I'm president of the National Press Club and editor-at-large at Bloomberg Business News. I'd like to welcome all the club members and their guests in the audience, as well as those of you watching on C-SPAN. There we are. Watching on C-SPAN or listening to this program on National Public Radio or the Global Internet Computer Network. Before introducing our head table, I would like to remind our our listeners, I'm a print journalist, what can I tell you, of upcoming speakers. On Monday, June 5th, former President Gerald Ford will present the annual Gerald R. Ford Prize for Distinguished Reporting on the Presidency. On Wednesday, June 7th, Hungarian Prime Minister Gyula Horn will present a speech entitled From Breaching the Wall to Reaching the Goal. And on Thursday, June 8th, film critics Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert will address a press club audience, and I guess they'll talk about the movies. Transcripts and audio and video tapes of press club luncheons are available by calling 1-800-NPC-2334. That's a new number now, 1-800-NPC-2334. That's the way they do it late night television, you know. If you have any questions for our speaker, please write them on the cards provided at your table, pass them up to me, and I will ask as many as time permits. I'd now like to introduce our head table guests and ask them to stand briefly when their names are mentioned. From your right, Ellen Ferguson, Gannett News Service, including the Burlington, Vermont Free Press. Tom Webb of the Wichita Eagle. Jesse Merrill, President, Merrill News and Feature Syndicate. Steve Tatro, Washington Bureau Chief, Donray Media Group. Mark Russell, what does he do for a living now? Gil Klein, Media General News Service, immediate past president of the National Press Club and our resident comedian. Lynn Sweet, Washington Bureau Chief, Chicago Sun-Times. Mark Johnson, Media General News Service, and the chairman of our Speakers Committee. Christy Wise, the freelance journalist who arranged today's luncheon. Charles Thompson, producer, CBS News 60 Minutes. Jack Reynolds Communications. Welcome back, Jack. Jeff Hertrick, senior producer, News Channel 8. And Bob Garfield, editor-at-large, Advertising Age. And I'd like to thank Melissa Bender, Chad Taylor, Melanie Abdo-Dermata, and Howard Rothman for organizing today's luncheon. Our speaker today, and this is true, began his professional life as an accountant. Bob? We'd like to invite you back to speak to the press club. On what? On the budget. Gosh, but I haven't practiced accounting for years. No, we want you to talk about the federal budget. Oh, you mean comedy? Sure, I'll be there. How did you go from accounting to comedy? Well, tell you the truth, I really wasn't very good at accounting. I couldn't understand how increasing spending from $2 billion to $4 billion amounted to a cut. I can see why you left accounting. Did you go directly into comedy? No, well, this is hard to do. I didn't realize. No, I became an advertising salesman. I wasn't good at that either. What happened? I didn't have any clients. But I didn't want the boss to know, so I talked to myself on the telephone. Sounds boring. It was. I mean, talking to me, so I started telling myself jokes. Now you're getting somewhere. Then I told jokes to other people, and that got me into nightclubs, theaters, and records. And weren't you on television once? In 1972, the Bob Newhart Show. And the movies? Yeah, I starred in a picture called Hell is for Heroes. Who was in that? Newt Gingrich. Sounds like a Democratic movie. I'm bipartisan. I did a Republican movie, too. What was that called? On a clear day, I can see forever. Who was in that? Senator Strom Thurmond. With those credits, I can see why you left the movies. Well, I went back into television as a New York do-it-yourself author turned Vermont innkeeper. What happened to that? It's off the air. So you've got nothing to do. That's why I thought maybe I'd come down and talk to the press club. When was the last time you were here? 1961. We told you we wanted you back. Okay, Bob, you're on.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Thank you. That's you stay out of my field, I'll stay out of yours, all right? You did that too good. You really did. No, I couldn't remember it, and it was 1961. I was here at the press club, and obviously made such an impression on people. They said, "Wow, we got to get this guy back as soon as possible." So, 35 years later, here I am. I was handed a note just before we started. Start Without Me, and it's signed Connie. Actually, when I got the letter from Gil, actually asking me to be here, I was very honored. I was reminded of a story about Jascha Heifetz, who the violinist, and he took a date in like February to appear at a Grange Hall in North Dakota in November. And the day approached, and it was snowing in New York, and he couldn't get out, and it was snowing in the Midwest. And he called up the booker, and he said, "I'm sorry, I can't make it." And they said, "Oh, Jascha," he said, there are 3,000 people here in the Grange Hall. If you could possibly get out, they'd be terribly disappointed." He said, "Well, I'll try." So he finally got the last plane out of LaGuardia, and he got to Denver, and he had to switch planes. He finally got to Fargo, and it was about 11 o'clock at night. He walks in the Grange Hall, and there are 12 people there. And Yasha went to the Booker, he said, I've never appeared in front of such a small audience. He said, well, there were 3,000 people here, but they were afraid you weren't coming. And Yasha said, well, I really don't know if I can do it. And the Booker said, well, Yasha, if you could just sing 1-2 songs is all. So I'm highly honored. I'm not sure you have the right person, but I'm highly honored. I saw in the paper today that Jonathan Price, the guy who does the Infinity commercials, apparently that came as a surprise to the to the Japanese manufacturers because their new campaign is now. When was the last time you saw this kind of luxury in a $250,000 car? Also, I did a joke. It's such a small town. I did a joke on Ron Brown and the problems he was having with the ethics committee, and apparently he heard about it, but he was very nice about it. They called up and said, if you haven't made arrangements, we'd like to make arrangements for accommodations for the 2 days you're here in Washington, which I thought, where's Bellhaven? Is that near here? Oh. I'm sure Mark has talked about, I'm intrigued by the Secretary General Boutros Ghali. I'm intrigued from the standpoint of the naming process that the parents went through when they found out that Mrs. Ghali was expecting, and well, honey, we really ought to think of a first name, before the baby's here. Well, I've always liked Boutros. Boutros, yeah, that's a nice name. Boutros, Boutros Ghali, I like that. And we really ought to settle on a middle name. I always liked Boutros. Boutros. But Bud was correct. I started out as an accountant and really probably could do some good here in D.C. With the budget, because I've always had a theory: if you got within $2 or $3 of it, that was close enough. But I really was an accountant because why would you lie about that? If you hadn't been an accountant, why would you ever tell someone you had been an accountant? And there is, by the way, even though take the boy out of accounting, you can't take accounting out of the boy, and there is an inequity in the tax laws, and it favors large corporations and doesn't favor individuals. And they have a thing called a tax loss carry forward, and if a corporation loses a lot of money in 1 year, they're able to spread that out over 5 years. And there was a large steel company, I won't mention the name, a couple of years ago, they lost $838 million in 1 year. And it always seemed to me like it comes as a surprise to them, like they thought they were making money all year, Yeah, how'd we do this year, Tom? 838 million, loss? You're out of here, you added that wrong, Tom, let me. 838, no, Thomas, sure right, yeah, we sure do. Now, if you're an individual, you cannot go to the IRS and say, my wife and I together, we make about $65,000 a year. So far this year, we've gone through $1.7 million. We were doing good through about March, I guess, and so I think I find in American humor today, a lot of people, we're becoming so super sensitive. I mean, it's almost impossible not to offend anyone. We're becoming thin-skinned. I think that's our diversity is kind of what made the country great, and we could always make. They tell a story. They tell a story in California that how can you tell if you're robbed by an Asian gang? And they say, well, your dog is gone, but your kid's math homework is done. So. I don't think that's harmful. That's just Asian people. Dog is a delicacy, and they're damn good at math. I mean. we're starting to, I once worked, this is a true story, I once worked for the Illinois State Unemployment Compensation Board. It's not called that anymore, it's now called the Department of Human Resources. And you're no longer unemployed, you are an underutilized human resource. But I worked there, and I worked behind the counter, and at this time, we got $60 a week, and the claimants got $55. It's true. It's true. and they only had to come in 1 day a week. Now, it took me about a week to figure that out, because I'm not the swiftest guy in the world, but anyway, I managed to get fired and wound up on the other side of the counter. I should explain autobiographically, I am 3/4 Irish, 1/4 German. The humor, I think, comes from the Irish side, because the Germans have never been known as one of the great fun races of all time. Germans are very they're very literal. You know, American humor is very often perverse, and we will very often say the exact opposite of what we mean, and that's totally lost on Germans. Like a German tourist would come up to you and say, I don't mean to bother you, but your friend Carly over there has no hair at all on his head. And Tiny is over 350 pounds. But to kind of prove the more things change, the more they remain the same. I would like to do a routine I did, I'll say a number of years ago, and that may even be more true today than it was at that time. And it had to do with the spin doctoring and the packaging of the presidency and the merchandising of the presidency. And it was based on a book by Vance Packard called The Hidden Persuaders. And the premise of it was that if we hadn't had this great president, President Lincoln, at the time of the Civil War, if this science were as well advanced then as it is today, the PR guys would have created a Lincoln out of the guy who was in office. So I imagine a phone conversation between Abe and his press agent when Abe calls from Gettysburg. Yeah, hi, Abe, sweetheart. How's everything going, kid? Yeah, I got your note. Well, what seems to be the problem, Abe? You're thinking about shaving it off. See, that's part of the image, Abe. Yeah, we're getting a lot of sound bites on that. Yeah, that and the shawl. You don't have the shawl. Where's the shawl, Abe? It's in Washington. What are you wearing, Abe? It's a kind of cardigan. Abe? Yeah, Abe, leave the beard on and find a shawl, okay? Yeah. Now, what's the problem? Your gag writers, yeah, they're here. What's the problem? You're getting a lot of complaints about Grant and his drinking. I don't see the problem, Abe. You knew he was a lush when you appointed him, you know? Well, I'll see what I can do, Abe. I'll get him working on it. Abe, you got the speech. Right, you haven't changed the speech. Abe, why do you change the speeches all the time? You typed it. Abe, how many times do we have to tell you on the envelopes? It looks like you wrote it on the train coming down, you know, Abe? Well, could you memorize it and then write it on the backs of the envelopes? Any other changes, Abe? You changed 7 to 87. Yeah, I know it's the same thing, Abe, but you know, we test marketed that in Erie, and they loved it, Abe. Anything else, Abe? People will little note, Abe, what could possibly be wrong with that? No, long remember, Abe, they'll remember it. Abe, what are you going to say? It's a great speech. I think everybody's going to remember it. You come off a braggart, Abe. Yeah. Do the speech the way Charlie wrote the inaugural, all right? All right? All right. Anything else? You talk to newsmen, Abe, we've asked you not to talk to newsmen. Well, you always put your foot... No, see, that's what I mean, Abe. No, you were a rail splitter, then an attorney. Well, it doesn't make any sense, Abe. You wouldn't give up your law practice to become a rail splitter, you know? Hey, read the biography, will you? It'll save a lot of trouble on this end. Hey, Nia, you got a piece of paper there? Now take this down. You can fool all of the people some of the time, and some of the people all of the time. But you can't fool all the people, well, you keep doing it differently, that's why, Abe. The last quote we got was, you can fool all the people all the time, Abe. Abe, hold on, the gag writers come up with something. Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Abe, yeah, they come up with a great line on Grant. The next time the reporters bug you about Grant, yeah, tell him you're going to find out what brand he drinks and send a case of it to all your other generals. No, Abe. It's like the brand. It's like the brand is the reason he's winning, Abe. No, Abe. Abe, you use it. It's funny. Trust me. That'll be this Saturday, Abe. I'm sorry I can't make it. Just you and what's her name, Mary right at the White House. Did you try Seward? He's out of town on the Alaskan deal. Oh, that's a shame. Then you and Mary will be alone at the. Abe? Yeah, why don't you take in a play? Thank you, bud.
Now comes the hard part, the questions from the audience. This one has to do with presidential humor. How do you rate President Clinton's sense of humor compared with other presidents you have known?
Wow. If we ever see it, no, I don't know. I think presidents aren't supposed to. I guess the last funny president was really JFK. I mean, he had a sense of humor about himself, and it's kind of been missing ever since that time. I think humor is wonderful. I think it's a necessary part of life in America, and it helps us get through some really, really tough times. And I'd like to see more humor, aside from the budget in government.
What do you think about Newt Gingrich? Is he easy to make fun of? And will you?
I leave that kind of up to Mark. I'm not much of a political animal. Newt is, as I was coming over here, he had some kind of breakfast at the hotel we're staying at, and I guess he does a lot of breakfast, that kind of thing. I am, I guess politically, I'm an agnostic. I know it exists. I just don't think you can prove it. That's.
Whose brainchild were the brothers Darrell, and what are they doing now?
They're running for the Senate like a lot of other people. That was the writers came up with that. I would take credit for it if I had come up with it, but the writers came up with it, and they were wonderful. They were a wonderful anomaly and very hard to explain. But two people would wind up with the same name. But whenever we were in a scene, we always had to put aside about 2 minutes because they got applause every time they walked in, and you just kind of freeze wherever you were, and then the applause would die down, and you go on with the scene. And they were a wonderful addition to Newhart, and I think had a lot to do with the success of Newhart.
Who was your favorite TV wife? Suzanne Plachette or Mary Fran? This is from Mrs. Newhart.
Well, Susie and I were, I told Mary Fran when we started Newhart, after the Bob Newhart show, that she had a very tough job, because Susie, we had a very special kind of chemistry, and that kind of thing you just can't create. And I told her she had one of the toughest jobs in television, and she did, and I thought she did an admirable job of it. But that the relationship between Susie and myself was something very special, and I see it on the show today, and it was a wonderful time. I remember Saturday night, I was talking to Mark about it, we were, Saturday night at one point was All in the Family, MASH, Mary Tyler Moore, us, and the Carol Burnett Show. And it was kind of a golden age, but we were so busy doing it, we didn't really have a chance to enjoy it. But looking back now, it was a lot of fun, and I'm very proud of both shows. I think they were very well written and very well acted. No, not me, no.
Well, what do you think of the comedy shows on television today? And a corollary, with the number of comedy clubs diminishing, what's the future of the business? This is from a fellow who's a stand-up comedian, and he's sitting down in the audience.
Mark, I wish you'd have asked me this. And we were up in the room, he had all kinds of time. It is, I enjoy anybody who makes people laugh. I don't draw the line at say that's over the line, that's grotesque. The good ones are going to stay, and the bad ones are going to fall by the wayside. But even the bad ones will have undergone the experience of standing up in front of an audience, and it will have prepared them for later things. I love comedy. I love people who do comedy, and I don't find any difference today between what I did and what they're doing. The boundaries may be expanded, but I think that's what's supposed to happen in comedy. My hat is off to anyone who makes anybody laugh in any form.
In these days of political correctness, could you still make fun of Mrs. Webb, the bad driver, and other sensitive subjects and caricatures?
That's what I was talking about earlier, about everybody being very sensitive about... I actually get a reaction now when I do. Mrs. Webb is the lady and the driving instructor, and because it's a woman, there's kind of a rumble that goes through the audience, like that. And so I explained to them, I said it was never my intention to make this a sexist routine. It was written over 35 years ago and performed 35 years ago. And that I think of Mrs. Webb as one of my dearest friends. And for those women in the audience who are sensitive to that it doesn't have to be a woman driver. I will make it a Chinese driver. And then proceed to go, and then tell them you can have 8 more minutes of this, or you can have it as a woman driver. So they're usually out for the... I mean, that's part of what the sense of humor about ourselves, we're losing. And I think it's just... I mean, I wrote it. I know what was on my brain when I wrote it, and I know my brain wasn't telling me make fun of women. I just found it a very fertile, funny area, and I really am concerned. I think we get uptight about so many things, and just, loosen up,
Well, now that we've had that horrendous baseball strike of last year, could you still do Abner Doubleday again?
Oh boy, that's...
and will you do a little?
You probably know it better than I do, and it throws me off to watch your lips move along with mine as I'm doing it. But I'll try, but I'm not sure. I haven't done it for a long time. It was a thing on inventions, and today you take it to a marketing company and they market that, they look at it from all different angles and decide whether it's going to be successful or not. And I imagined if we'd ever have baseball, if Abner Doubleday had gone to one of these merchandising companies and with his idea for baseball, and I may miss parts of it because I haven't done it for a while, but I imagine a phone conversation that went something like this. Olympic Games, what can I do for you, Mr. Doubleday? You got a game, huh? How many couples, Mr. Doubleday? 18 people. That's a hell of a lot of people, Mr. Doubleday. Well, the ideal game is, you get 2-3 couples over to the house, they get a little swacked and... Sure, tell me about it, huh? You got a pitcher and a catcher. and they throw this ball back and forth. and that's it, is it, Mr. Doubleday? a guy from the other side stands between them with a bat. And he swings at it, does he, Mr. Doubleday? He may or he may not swing at it. Why wouldn't he swing at it, Mr. Doubleday? If it looked like it were going to be a ball. Yeah, would you mind explaining that, Mr. Doubleday? As long as it's above the knees and below the shoulders, that's a strike. 3 strikes and you're out. And then 3 balls? 4 balls. Why 4 balls, Mr. Doubleday? No one's ever asked you before. Or he may hit it. What happens if he hits it? He runs as far as it can go. He can go as long as it... as long as it stays what? As long as it stays fair. What's fair, Mr. Doubleday? You have these 2 white lines. Mr. Doubleday, no, I don't want to hear about the infield fly rule, Mr. Doubleday. That's the most complicated game I've ever heard of in my life. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Of all the routines you've done, which skit earned you the most acclaim and likewise the most censure?
The one I'm most proud of is the Abe Lincoln thing, because I think it said the most. I think it was the best piece of writing I ever did. Commercially, the driving instructor was probably successful. I got some flack for the retirement party, where a guy's retiring from a company, and he's bombed out of his mind, because that's the only way he could work for this company. That's the only way he could get through it. And I always thought it made a kind of comment, but somebody misunderstood, and they said, "How can you make fun of this Charlie Bedloe?" And I said, "I'm not making fun of Charlie Bedloe. I'm making fun of the company that made Charlie Bedloe the way he is." And I would say that in the Submarine Commander. They're all kind of. It's like asking which child is your favorite child. I've enjoyed doing all of them over the years, and the most fun is the next one, whatever that one's going to be.
Well, several people have asked for a little bit of the bus driver training skit. So you can get the little old lady spinning down the aisle and a few others.
Well, of course, that's the punchline, Bud, but... That one I don't remember. That is too old. I really don't remember that one.
Your bus driver?
No. You know what? Do it. What?
little old lady spinning down the aisle. That's it. That's it. That's the punchline.
Well, and it must be timing, because I get a laugh on that.
Why are there no variety shows anymore like the old Ed Sullivan show?
Well, you're asking me questions. I really don't. I don't know why there aren't. You got MTV, and you can see everybody for almost nothing. You can see them on the Tonight Show. I guess that's why. When it was, doing the Sullivan Show was. That was the epitome. That was the very height, and it was abject terror. I remember one time I was I was standing backstage, and you never knew who you were going to follow, and I followed, of all things, a French samurai act. It was a French samurai act, and they came out and they did this whole thing, and now Ed calls them over. Now I know in the booth they're going crazy, saying, "Oh my God, why they don't talk? Why the hell is Ed called?" So Ed calls them over. Say, where are you fellows from? And the two Frenchmen look at each other like suddenly they learned English. Now Ed does what all Americans do when people don't understand what we're saying in a foreign tongue. He yells at them. Where are you fellows from? So finally one of them realized what Ed is saying, and he says, Paris. And Ed said, well, you at Paris, you say hi to our very good friend, General de Gaulle. Now the chances of a French samurai act ever running into General de Gaulle, and that's what I miss about television today, I guess.
Are television comedy shows now too dependent on one central character instead of an ensemble cast? You know, Jack Benny had a whole group of characters. Now we got...
Well, Jack, but I think I think Seinfeld's very much an ensemble cast, and Frasier and Mad About You and the good shows, all the good shows. I remember Jack Benny, a story of Jack Benny, they told about Jack Benny that he had Ronald Coleman on, and it was just a script reading, and Jack said, he was one of the dearest men in the world, he said, that's a funny line, give that to Dennis, because that's better coming from Dennis. And so I gave it, and he said, no, don't take that line away from me, give it to Phil, Phil's better. And wound up giving all the great lines away, and Ronald Coleman at the end, when the script reading was over, he said, Jack, you gave away all your best lines. And Jack said, yeah, but I'll be back next week.
We understand you play a lot of golf with John Rickles. What's his handicap?
His mouth is his handicap. No, Don and I are good friends. We just returned from, it actually started out in a very strange way. I was approached and they said, Don doesn't have a friend, would you mind being his friend? And I thought it was a temporary job. I had no idea it would last 30 years. We just came back from Southeast Asia, and we just had a great time together. And it's that inexplicable thing. Our wives have great fun together, and we enjoy each other's company. And I guess we're opposites, but we are genuinely good friends.
What do you think of Connie Chung's current situation, and what would you advise her to do?
I wouldn't advise CBS to do anything. They're doing such a great job right now. I can't. Far be it from me to advise them.
Do you still keep in touch with Johnny Carson, and what's he up to now?
I still keep in touch with John. John is he's the best. He's the standard by which all other talk shows will ever be judged. He is, and that's not a put down of Letterman or Leno or any of the others. But after 30 years, let's judge how good they were. I mean, what he did was absolutely incredible. It was, I find it incredible. I couldn't have done it. I did it for 3 weeks, and I was a blithering idiot at the end of 3. I mean, the man dedicated his life to that show, and did one thing that's similar to the Jack Benny thing. He made you look good. You knew when you were sitting there, you knew Johnny wasn't going to leave you out there. You knew he was going to help you out and never make you look bad because he knew he was going to be there tomorrow. I miss it a lot. I miss him a lot, and I think maybe now people are beginning to realize how really good he was at what he did.
What about the comedians of the old days? Would Fred Allen, for example, make it today?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I think the comedians who will make it today are the comedians who had respect for the comedians that preceded them. I mean, I know I did. I found Jack Benny and Fred Allen enormous talents. If there's anyone you could, anyone you could study as a comedian coming up, I would think it would be Jack Benny. I was influenced by Bob and Ray. I was influenced by and Thurber and Max Schulman. And I think I have a feeling that if you're able to do stand-up comedy, I really think you have to keep doing it. I think it's. I mean, there are some performers who have stopped, and I don't think they should. I think it's a unique thing to be able to do, and if you're able to do it well, I think you have an obligation to do it. I think if you're able to make people laugh, it's one of the best things you can ever do in your life. There are certainly more important things, but it's one of the best things you can ever do in your life, and I don't think you should ever stop doing it.
Where did the concept of the telephone routine really come from? It wasn't from me.
Well, the telephone routine was, I mean, I'm giving credit for it, but I certainly didn't originate it. Shelley Berman before me did telephone routines, and Mike and Lane did a lot of telephone routines. George Jessel used to do telephone routines. One of the earliest records ever made was a thing called Cohen on the Telephone. So it's been around for a long time. The interesting thing about the telephone routine and about the especially Abe Lincoln, is nothing that I'm saying is funny. What is funny is what is unheard. What you hear Abe saying on the other end of the conversation, and it's kind of a collaborative thing between the audience and the performer, and people kind of pat themselves on the back because we're kind of in tune at that point. They know what I'm saying, and I know what they're saying. But I can't take credit for originating. It was around long before I started doing it.
This is meant to be a friendly question. What's it like to be anywhere in the country, sitting in a motel room, flipping on the television set, and seeing yourself from 20, 30, 40 years ago?
It is, it's very nice, is what it is. I mean, aside monetarily from the rewards, just to know that you spent a life that you made people laugh and they're laughing, and that's. I wouldn't trade places with anybody, to be honest with you. So.
The questioner has trouble with all the trash television that's filling the tube today. Do you see that coming to an end or getting worse?
I don't watch it, so I don't. I'm certainly not the person to answer that. The height I ever saw was in L.A. the height of trash television. It was it came out at Newsbreak at 10 o'clock, and they said, headless nude body found by railroad tracks, film at 11. Now, I defy anyone to go to sleep knowing that that's coming up at 11 o'clock.
You mentioned Benchley. Where are the Benchleys, the Thurbers, the Ring Lardners, the S.J. Perlmans of today? Have you found any out there?
Russell, I think Dave Barry, I think they're out there. There are going to be some names I forgot. They're very, the plegic, I forget his name. Anyone help me out with that? He's terribly funny, terribly sick, terribly funny. I think they're out there. They're out there in a different, I meant Russell Baker, of course. No. No, Mark is up there all by himself. We all know that. Especially Mark knows that.
Well, over the years, who makes you laugh the most?
It's a tough question because I have so many friends that are comedians, and so many comedians make me laugh. Don Rickles, obviously, Shecky Gray Hackett. There's so many. I find Seinfeld very funny. I find Chandler very funny. Letterman, Leno. A young kid named Jake Johansson. I think he's very inventive. This is going to sound strange to you. The person that makes me laugh the most is Richard Pryor. He is, we certainly work in two different arenas, but he is about as funny a human being as God has ever put on the face of the earth, and I'm indebted to him. He does a thing called Mudbone. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Mudbone it's beyond comedy. It's Mark Twain and Will Rogers. It's a look into Black American culture that I would never have seen, and his insights are just incredible. I'm sorry that Richard is, as you all know, is not doing well health-wise, but whenever I got down, and comedians get down, God knows we do, and I would always put on a Richard Pryor album and listen to it, and it'd pick me up like that, and I guess that's what we're supposed to do. That's what we do.
Well, now that you've returned to the National Press Club, do you expect to be returning to television anytime soon?
Well, let's see. Having been an accountant, this shouldn't be that hard. 95 and 35 would be 2030, so I'm due back here in 2030. And I don't see television as something, I'm not actively pursuing that. It's another time. That certainly is not said with bitterness or anything. It's just a different time, and I certainly enjoyed the time I had. I mean, I couldn't ask for more fun. I don't see television as really being. I don't see myself on television in the future.
We do.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you came up with the final episode for Newhart, the flashback to the Bob Newhart show?
Well, it's very easy. It was my wife's idea. I was oddly enough, having trouble with CBS in the 6th year of the Newhart show. They kept the in show, and they kept moving it around 10:30 at night, and then I finally said, honey, I told my wife, said, the hell with it. I said, this is my last year. I don't want to do anymore, because I'm not going to let the show limp off. And so we happened to be at a Christmas party in Beverly Hills, and Susie was there, and she said, well, my wife said, if this is the final season, you should do a dream sequence, and you should wake up in bed with Susie, and the whole, at that point, 6 years of Newhart would have been a dream. And I said, oh my God, that's a great idea. Well, it turned out I did 2 more years of Newhart, and then when we realized it was the final show, I gave the idea, and they fleshed it out and did a very good job of the Japanese buying all around the end. But the idea of waking up in bed and Susie being there was my wife's idea, and Entertainment Weekly, it was the number one final episode in their estimation.
Why do you feel your last show, Bob, didn't do better?
You know, it's all the idea of getting off one question too late, you know? Everything was going so damn well, and then... that's one of the reasons I don't see myself on television, because I don't know what was wrong with it. It was all the elements that I thought were there for a successful show. We had great writers. We had the writers from Cheers. God knows it doesn't get any better than that. We had a great cast. You kind of become your own worst enemy because people start saying, I don't know, I like the Bob Newhart show better, I like Newhart better, well, I like this better. I'm at a loss to explain why it didn't work, because it had those elements. It obviously didn't, and it was quite painful experience for a year and a half, but there is a life after sitcoms.
Well, your show played before live audiences. That's a hallmark of your career. Was that by your choice, and what did you like about it?
Yeah, that was by choice. We all were doing at that time. We were all doing shows. Mary Tyler Moore, All in the Family, Lucy, who started the whole thing, that was always done in front of a live audience. I always insisted on a live audience because you just, my background was nightclubs, and you don't want to be totally on top of the material. You want to have that kind of unknown, the unexpected kind of happening. I found I always performed better. I found the other actors always performed better. I found the writing was always better in front of a live audience. Two things I did insist on. When the Bob Newhart show started, I insisted on playing a psychologist, not a psychiatrist, because a psychiatrist, in my estimation, dealt with much more serious. I didn't want to make fun of schizophrenics or manic depressives. And the other thing was I didn't want to do a show about how stupid Daddy was and how the kids all would pitch in and look at the fix Daddy's got himself into and how do we get him out of it, and we love Daddy and thank God we got him out of it. I didn't want to do that kind of show, the dumb father show. So I said I don't want to have children. I mean, there are enough shows on the air with children. I don't want to have children. I think it should be a show about two adults. And in the 6th year, I got a script and I read it. We were going to do it Monday, and I read it Sunday night, and Emily was pregnant. And I called up the producer, Mike Zinberg, and I said, Mike, I said, it's a funny script. He said, well, really? He said, we were afraid you weren't happy with it. I said, no, it's a very funny script. He said, did you like the part about Emily being pregnant? I said, oh, God, that's funny. It's a very funny scene. Who are you going to get to play Bob? I mean, that's exactly the kind of show I didn't want to do. There are enough. I'm not putting them down. There are enough good ones. It's just I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do that kind of show.
Thank you. Before we do our famous last question, I have a couple of gifts for you. This is a certificate of appreciation for being with us.
Well, that's very nice. Thank you.
You probably got one of those in 1961.
It's a bit yellowed, but,
yeah.
But I have it, yeah.
And this is the National Press Club. The last one you got, I think, was about 4 ounces. We've enlarged them since the last
Thank you very much.
years.
It really has been a pleasure, and will always be. It was then a great moment in my life, and it is this day a great moment in my life to be asked to be here, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And now we're getting to the final question. You may or may not be aware that there is a drinking game called Bob, in which viewers of your shows take a swig every time a character says Bob. Did you realize this game, and were you enlisted by the liquor industry?
I'm aware of the game. I've received one Emmy, a Peabody. I was inducted into the Television Hall of Fame, and the last thing I want to be known for is causing more hangovers in college dorms than any man alive. It's a tribute to the show. I worry a little bit about it, because I certainly wouldn't want anyone playing Hi Bob and then driving or going. But it's a tribute to the show finally came into its own. We were always behind Mary, and Mary's show was an incredibly wonderful show and marvelously cast. But finally, the Bob Newhart show came into its own, and even Hi Bob had a strange recognition of it. But I guess the college students wouldn't be watching it if they didn't think it was funny. That's what I'm most proud of. I think that the Bob Newhart show finally, which is not the Bob Newhart show, it was obviously all the writers and the cast. I'm most proud of that it finally is being recognized as being a pretty good show.
Well, I think I can speak for everyone here when we say it was a very good show. Thank you very much for being with us this afternoon, sir, and we thank you all in the audience, and I guarantee you it will not have the 35 years before you come back. Good afternoon. Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
I
Bud.
thought it
Thank
went
you.
fairly
Yes,
well.
I'm very happy.
We're a little self-absorbed. What do you think of the hearings of the
Jack Reynolds Communications. Welcome back, Jack. Jeff Hertrick, Senior Producer, News Channel 8. And Bob Garfield, Editor-at-Large, Advertising Age. And I'd like to thank Melissa Bender, Chad Taylor, Melanie Abdo-Dermata, and Howard Rothman for organizing today's luncheon. Our speaker today, and this is true, began his professional life as an accountant. Bob? We'd like to invite you back to speak to the press club. On what? On the budget. Gosh, Bud, I haven't practiced accounting for years. No, we want you to talk about the federal budget. Oh, you mean comedy? Sure, I'll be there. How did you go from accounting to comedy? Well, tell you the truth, I really wasn't very good at accounting. I couldn't understand how Before introducing our head table, I would like to remind our listeners, I'm a print journalist, what can I tell you, of upcoming speakers. On Monday, June 5th, former President Gerald Ford will present the annual Gerald R. Ford Prize for Distinguished Reporting on the Presidency. On Wednesday, June 7th, Hungarian Prime Minister Gyula Horn will present a speech entitled From Breaching the Wall to Reaching the Goal. And on Thursday, June 8th, film critics Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert will address a press club audience, and I guess they'll talk about the movies. Transcripts and audio and video tapes of press club luncheons are available by calling 1-800-NPC 1-800-NPC-2334. That's a new number now, 1-800-NPC-2334. That's the way they do it late night television, you know. If you have any questions for our speaker, please write them on the cards provided at your table, pass them up to me, and I will ask as many as time permits. I'd now like to introduce our head table guests and ask them to stand briefly when their names are mentioned. From your right, Ellen Ferguson, Gannett News Service, including the Burlington, Vermont Free Press. Tom Webb of the Wichita Eagle. Jesse Merrill, President, Merrill News and Feature Syndicate. Steve Tatro, Washington Bureau Chief, Donray Media Group. Mark Russell, what does he do for a living? Gil Klein, Media General News Service, immediate past president of the National Press Club and our resident comedian. Lynn Sweet, Washington Bureau Chief, Chicago Sun-Times. Mark Johnson, Media General News Service, and the chairman of our Speakers Committee. Christy Wise, the freelance journalist who arranged today's luncheon. Charles Thompson, producer, CBS News 60 Minutes. Jack Reynolds, chasing spending from $2 billion to $4 billion amounted to a cut. I can see why you left the county. Did you go directly into comedy? No. No, well, this is hard to do. I didn't realize. No, I became an advertising salesman. I wasn't good at that either. What happened? I didn't have any clients. But I didn't want the boss to know, so I talked to myself on the telephone. Sounds boring. It was. I mean, talking to me, so I started telling myself jokes. Now you're getting somewhere. Then I told jokes to other people, and that got me into nightclubs, theaters, and records. And weren't you on television once? In 1972, the Bob Newhart Show. And the movies? Yeah, I starred in a picture called Hell is for Heroes. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Monroe Carmen. I'm president of the National Press Club and editor-at-large at Bloomberg Business News. I'd like to welcome club members and their guests in the audience. Can you hear me? All right, no. Is this on? I hope so. Anybody else having trouble? Okay, well, it's not on. Melissa? Go ahead. Now can you hear me? Well, good afternoon. I'll do it this way. My name is Monroe Carmen. I'm president of the National Press Club and editor-at-large at Bloomberg Business News. I'd like to welcome all the club members and their guests in the audience, as well as those of you watching on C-SPAN. There we are. Watching on C-SPAN or listening to this program on National Public Radio or the Global Internet Computer Network.